us today, and thanks for joining today's webinar, OJJDP Fiscal Year 2019, Title II, Formula Grants, Solicitation. My name is William Moore, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And as your technical host, I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements just for you to keep in mind. Please note that today's event is being recorded and will be published on OJJDP NTTAC's YouTube page. The webinar recording will be archived in approximately a week on OJJDP's NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. And for the event transcript or any supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here you will also find an FAQ for webinar participants that will likely address any technical related questions. Click on the name of the file and then click the download button. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a Q&A session where the presenters will address some of the questions posed during our presentation. Please type your question into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people that are in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod. Again, if you are viewing today's presentation alone, there is no need to type anything into the chat pod. And please be sure to visit OJJDP's website and at the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided a link to a brief survey about today's presentation. The feedback you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn our presentation over to Karen Harp, Administrator for OJJDP, for our welcome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to, can anybody hear me? Okay. Hello, welcome to the webinar. We're delighted that you're joining us, and I think after having reviewed some of these slides and looked at everyone who's participating on the webinar and all the staff here that are in the room, I think we're going to be able to provide you with some really useful information, certainly, as we work through the new and we hope improved Title II solicitation. I think, gosh, since probably spring, April or May sometime, when we started, well, we got out there in the field and started telling folks we were going to significantly change the way we were approaching Title II and trying to simplify the application process and lift the burden a little bit on the states so that it wouldn't take, just the application alone wouldn't take so much time. I think we've done that. I think you can see we've whittled down from a 90-page application down to a 30-page application, and that's some progress. Now, granted, this is our Year 2 application, so usually Year 2 and Year 3 applications are going to be somewhat simpler. But this, I think you'll see, actually gives you a taste of what we can or what you can expect going forward. This is the kind of simplification we're looking for. We're looking for your feedback also. We want to take all of your questions, and if you've noticed anything about the solicitation that you think is confusing or difficult to read or manage, this is the place. Get it out there so we can talk about it, and if we need to tweak things and fix things, we will. Dr. Bradford is here, and I think you are going to take off with this. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's pretty much all I have for you, and Dr. Sneed Bradford is going to work through this process with you.
Thank you. Welcome. Excited to get to this day. I know that some of you and many of you I've crossed paths with since we started having this discussion, I think, at CJJ and a few other forums and phone calls and follow-ups. That we have made it, and we're excited about it. I'm glad to be presenting with a great team today. Nicole Dennis is Deputy Associate for the new State Relations and Assistance Division, and Kathy Manning, who may also not be of a surprise to you. She was with SED previously. She is our lead for developing and getting the Title II solicitation out. She's also co-presenting, and will go over some of the program requirements. Ladies, have anything you want to share before we continue to move forward? Okay, so officially we are moving on to providing an overview for the Title II grant solicitation update year 2. And as we discussed previously in planning, we have a 2-part application process. We'll be going over the eligibility requirements, which is a big deal. Many of you have been dealing with that in a number of different ways over the last several years. And so we want to get that out of the way first in part 1 of the application of category 1. We'll go over some narrative requirements, compliance. Just so you also know, Julie is in the room with me. She is my Lionel Brown security blanket, along with Alyssa Rumley. Many of you may know as well, pioneers. But they're here in the room, and then we've got Brittany. You just love Brittany. All of the team that we love. We have people in the room that can help us kind of figure out technologically what's going on. Julie will help with compliance, and then we'll kind of go through the application process and deadline. All right, so Karen already talked about the simplicity of the approach. I want to go back to my first, interestingly enough, I've been here a few days ago. And one of the first things I heard during our last year's training, which we had not had for a long time for compliance, was that we had a very labor-intensive process, not a lot of questions answered, lots of burdens, less money. And so we've been trying to find ways to think about how we can get that fixed for you, but also make sure that we're managing accountability and objectivity about how we do our business. And so when we say that we're simplifying the approach, we're simplifying the application, but certainly not what's required, certainly not what we need to do to make sure that you actually are in compliance with the core requirements and the state plan requirements. And so we're using what we call this 2-part process to help you figure out how to get it right if it's not quite right. So category 1 really is eligibility. It goes through that 28 plan requirements. It tells us where you are. It's kind of a pulse check. And we will use between the date of submission, October 1, and when we let you know whether you're eligible or not, to work through what that looks like, what we're calling an internal desk review process. We'll go in more detail as questions come. You'll find on the next slide that there's a link to the solicitation that you'll be able to get. And before I go any further, I just want you to know that you will find that some of the slides have updates and changes. So there's been lots of questions that have come in where we said, oops, we kind of got that wrong. And as we've caught those things, we have tried to fix those things. And so some of your questions that we will see at the end may already get answered as we're going through the presentation. I will also, before we take questions and answer, go into that session, I will also go through the solicitation again and note which things will be changed. Once we're done with the webinar and we get final clearance, we will post the revision of that. Okay, so the deadlines. GMS registration deadline is September 24th. Category 1, again, the eligibility requirements that I just spoke of, those due dates, that due date is October 1st. And then Category 2 is February 28th. The compliance data reports and DMC plan submissions, any updates to the state plan, and then any other application requirements will be due February 28th of 2019. I guess it's important to note right now, just because we got 4 or 5 questions about this. The compliance data certification form was listed in the solicitation as being due on October 1st. It is not due October 1st. It is due February 28th. The solicitation will note that change once we get it reposted. All right, I'm passing on to Kathy.
Right. Thanks very much, Janine. Hi, everyone. This is Kathy Manning, and I did just want to mention, although there's not a bullet on this slide for it, but Janine just referenced that GMS registration deadline, and I see that many of you have already been working on your GMS registrations. Thank you very much. GMS registration is really just the process to initiate your application, and I've been working to approve those as they come in so that you're able to proceed with your application. Some of you have already heard from me. I've reached out with a couple of questions. I don't believe that GMS gives you a notification when I approve your application registration. So if you have any questions about the status of if your application registration has been approved or not, you're welcome to reach out to me, but please know that we're working through those as you initiate your registrations for that September 24th deadline. So for the October 1st deadline, which we refer to as Category 1, based on how we're handling this in GMS this year with a couple of different deadlines. So Category 1 is October 1, and Category 1, October 1, everything is to be submitted in GMS. The items that belong under Category 1, October 1, are the Year 2 Eligibility Assurances and Certifications Form. I want to point out that this is a new format this year, but really a lot of the content will be familiar to you because it's from the JJDP Act and familiar from previous years, what we called Appendix I last year, those 28 requirements. So a new format, but you're familiar with much of the material. Again, as Janine has said and as Administrator Harp said, because FY19 is an update year, you submitted your new 3-year plans in 2018, the requirements are streamlined. So that's why some of these things are shorter than they were last year. As you read through the eligibility assurances and certifications form, you'll see that the requirements for submission of items depend on whether your state was found to be in compliance with DSO, separation, or jail removal the previous year. So you'll want to read through that form and follow the instructions where it says, if yes, do this, if no, do this. And that will determine whether you're submitting narrative plans for DSO, separation, or jail removal, or the related certification if the state was in compliance the preceding year. I do want to point out in that Year 2 Eligibility Assurances and Certifications form, in the middle of the page, under number 1, it says, it's an accidental circular reference. It says, if yes, submit the Year 2 eligibility form, which is the form you're looking at. That really should say, if yes, submit the compliance plans and resources certifications form, which is what number 2 and number 3 correctly say. So we're fixing that typo, but just wanted to explain that reference there. The training certification form is due in Category 1. Also the compliance plans and resources certification. For this form, as some of you have raised the question, the data reporting period should say October 1st, 2016 to September 30th, 2017. Again, that's for the compliance plans and resources certification form. It should refer to, and it will, refer to October 1st, 2016 to September 30th, 2017 for that form. And then the remaining item I wanted to mention on this slide due in Category 1, October 1, is the State Advisory Group roster. And I will turn it to Nicole Dennis to go through Category 2.
Thank you, Kathy. So this is Nicole, and basically what we tried to do today is really give you guys a checklist on what to submit when. So you can hold on to this PowerPoint and use it later, but also note that for Category 2, we'll offer a workshop for Category 2. If you have any questions, we'll be there to help you go through the solicitation. Your program manager will also be there to help you. And also around mid-December to early January, we do plan to send out an email via our listserv, and your program manager will get in contact with you directly to discuss Category 2, to send you any information that you may need to register, and to send you the links to the compliance tool and the GMS registration if you need to register again. So do not worry, you will get ample reminders. We're here to help you through this process. Our goal is that this will be more streamlined and easy for you to apply. So for category 2, there's 2 different parts. One part you will submit in GMS, and the other part you will submit within the compliance tool. So what you will submit in GMS is really the standard application documents that you typically submit yearly. That's going to be your disclosure of pending applications, your disclosure of lobbying, your state agency contact information, your fiscal year 19 budget information, and remember the budget period is October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2022. In addition, if you have any changes or updates to your state plan, you will address in your narrative on page, and it's also in the solicitation on page 11, any changes that you have. So that would be a description of your issue, goals and objectives, any implementation activities, any new timelines you would address there. If you have no changes to your already submitted 3-year state plan, and if it was already submitted, unless your program manager contacted you otherwise, it is approved. So if you have no changes, all you will do is submit a brief statement that explains that you have no changes to your previously submitted 3-year plan. We hope that this will help all of you all as you go through this process again. Additionally, you will have to submit your financial management questionnaire, any pass-through waiver requests, and any research and evaluation information. If you are proposing to do research and evaluation, please be reminded that that will trigger additional requirements and conditions on your award. What we hope to do this year is if you anticipate doing research, if you can contact your program manager and give them a heads up, we'll be able to talk to you more about that process and some of the additional requirements, and therefore you can decide if that's an undertaking that you would really want to spend your money doing. So the next part under category 2 is what you will submit under our compliance tool. Again, a lot of this information is going to be the compliance, monitoring, data certificate form, all of your compliance information, your data, any supporting documentation, your rule removal exception form, if that's applicable, and most importantly, your DMC plans and any supporting documentation for that. What our plan is to do around this, as I know there's probably more questions around compliance and what to submit, is again, we will be here to walk you guys through all of these forms, all of these requirements. There's a sample in the solicitation for some of the forms that you can click on, and we are here, the reason we're trying to get through the slides quickly is that we are here to answer any questions that you may have today. We'll also, again, be at the training in November to go through any of this compliance and what's the supporting documentation and what's needed. So that's pretty much it for what you would submit. Again, we're here to help you. We're here to be a resource for you. So if you have any questions, please contact us.
So before we start taking questions, I'm reading through some of them. Quite frankly, there may be a couple that we'll have to follow up on, but we'll try to get through your questions. So before we go into Q&A, I want to reiterate some changes. If you have your solicitation in front of you, we'll go through it for the minor changes to note. So on page 4 and 5, particularly on page 4, category 1, I think you, and I said this before, you will note that the compliance monitoring data certification form will be due in category 2 with your data report submission. All right, that's important to note. I just want to make sure because there are several questions. I want to say Andrew from Massachusetts was the first question we got, and then we subsequently knew that we had some experts in the field who caught that same detail. So that is important to note. That's probably the biggest change to note in the solicitation. Page 11, we tweaked paragraph that has number 3 in front of it to just clarify that your compliance plans, your training certifications, your compliance plans and resource certifications, if and where applicable, is due Category 1, and then your DMC plans and your compliance monitoring data certifications are due February, oh my goodness, 28th. Thank you. Then, I'm sure, page 23 on what used to be, I think, Appendix G in the old solicitation. Again, just a minor typo. Category 2 information to include the compliance data submission and DMC plans is due February 28th, not February 27th. And again, that is your compliance data, report submissions, and DMC plans. You'll see that kind of tweaked in the solicitation once it's reposted. And then, there was a question about, under that same appendix, under DMC plan, there was a question about whether question number 6 under DMC, develop an action plan, is relevant. I just got confirmation that it is. We'll have some detailed information about what that means when we have our November training. We'll try to figure out a way to make sure that whoever's not available can at least have access to that information. But I want to make sure that people know that when we discuss the framework of public safety, it's throughout everything that we do. There's been some concerns about what does that mean in regard to DMC. We can spend more time going in that in the detail when we focus on developing those action plans. I'll do my best to answer some questions, and some of those answers will have to wait. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that because it was a question about whether that question was relevant in the application or not, and it is. And then we have on page 30, we're going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, auto-populating the right fiscal year dates. Okay, on all the forms. All right. So now I'm going to take questions. All right, first
and just
question.
a reminder. And just as a reminder to our audience, you can submit your question in the chat pod located between the handouts and the closed caption pod.
The first question I have, okay, it got switched up on me. I don't see it anymore. All right, first question is from Teresa. Hey, Teresa. Taneen saying that the solicitation has changed now. The solicitation is being revised to capture the tweaks and the fixes. I just went through what those minor tweaks were. Okay. I also answered which questions were changed. Laura McCauley asked, when will we hear about our 2018 submissions and approvals? That should come any day now. Kathy?
So I'll just chime in again, as Nicole mentioned on her slide, and I know this question has come up from a few people because we say, you know, in the solicitation it references, you know, if your 2018 plan was approved and you don't have any changes, and some people are like, well, how do I know if my plan was approved? So unless you have heard from your contact here at OJJDP that there is some item pending or, you know, something outstanding or an issue with your plan has been approved. Technically, the official notification of that will be when you receive your 2018 award, which will happen before the end of the fiscal year. But please be in contact with your partner here at OJJDP if you have a question, but unless you have heard otherwise, your plan has been accepted and approved.
And let me just offer a caveat since I'm coming from the compliance side. Yep. There are some appeals, some things that are going on, so those people know, so those states know who they are and what we're following up on.
Yeah, so do reach out here if you still feel uncomfortable with, well, I'm not sure, would I know if I knew? Or,
Yeah.
Do reach out to your person here.
I think the next question, forgive my lack of technical proficiency. I'm working on it. All right, so I have Leslie Biddleson. I'm confused. We just submitted our FY18, not word on those yet. Now they want FY19. I think Kathy just answered your question. Let me know if that doesn't work for you. All right, Joyce Shelton. Alan Miller. On year 2 form, what do we do if we are out of compliance in 2018, but do not have any change in our plan for 2019? Do we just send the 2018 plan? Okay. Julie's saying the plan should be revised every year, Alan and Joyce. Okay. Melinda Sandel. How do we submit the certification of compliance data if it will not be submitted until February? I think we answered that question. You submitted in February. Alan. I believe Kathy said the compliance. I'm sorry, Alan Miller. Sorry, Alan. I feel like we know each other well enough for me to just say Alan. I believe Kathy said the compliance data certification is now due on February 28th. I had the same question. Yep, it is. South Carolina, Mr. Anderson. Number 3 says to see the DNC plans link for more specific instructions. The word link is not a hyperlink. Is this link located somewhere else? I'm looking at my tech person.
We'll double check and make sure it is, but it should be at the primary link where all the documents are housed.
Okay. Check the primary link. We'll double check, okay? Tell my South Carolina family hello. Hi. Oh, Mr. Herrick, Dr. Herrick, how are you? Is OJJDP no longer requiring that states follow the DMC reduction model in their response to DMC? We have changed the model. It is as listed in the solicitation. If you have any more specific questions, certainly feel free to give me a call. Number is 202-532-0030. Another question from Alan. Is the compliance plan due Category 1 developed using the data from 10/116 to 9/30/17? Julie.
So if I'm correctly understanding this question, Alan, you are going to figure out whether or not you even need to submit plans for DSO separation and jail removal on the basis of whether or not you were in compliance during FY17. So if you were in compliance with DSO separation and jail removal in FY17, then you don't need to submit plans for DSO separation and jail removal. You can instead do the certification of adequate plans and resources and then just check off all 3 boxes. For any of those things that you were out of compliance with in FY17, you will actually need to submit a plan.
Ms. Anna Lopez, for the DMC plan, data to be used, can this be for the time period set by the state as we did last year? For instance, some states have different fiscal years. I'm going to have to follow up on that question, Anna. We are noting it, and we'll get back to you. Dr. Herring, are the relative rate index spreadsheets and 5-step RI analysis no longer required? You are correct. The RI is no longer required. That doesn't mean the states can't use it. I just want to caveat that. Does not mean the states cannot use it. We are no longer requiring it. William, it looks like the office is asking only for a statewide view of DSM data. Is that correct? Yes. The state is responsible for the administration of funds. They can use that data, obviously, dig deeper to determine if there's an action plan they want to develop to respond to potential pulse checks for disparities. But the data should be state-wide that's submitted. And then, of course, the state is responsible for discussing how they are using that data to develop their action plan. Do we submit a statement of no changes under each section in the narrative for updates?
I can take that. This is Kathy. So if you have no changes to your 2018 three-year plan, you can just provide one statement as an attachment in GMS that says we have no changes to our 2018 three-year plan. You don't need to go through each of the sections in the solicitation where, you know, the different narrative sections. If you are making changes to your 2018 three-year plan, then you would want to provide the relevant narrative for each of the sections that are changing. You know, if you're taking on a new focus area or something, you would want to provide the relevant information and narrative to support that. But if you're not making any changes, you don't have to list out, we don't have any changes in this section of the narrative, we don't have any changes in this section, just one statement saying we are not making any changes to our 2018 three-year plan.
Okay. Next question. If a state was in compliance for FY18, do we still need to submit a response for number 4 on the Year 2 Eligibility Assurance and Certifications form?
Let's come back to that one because Kathy and I are looking at it right now.
Okay, we're coming back for the call answer that question.
Thank you. And as we wait for more questions to come in, just wanted to remind the audience that today's webinar will be available on our YouTube page. Please continue to submit your questions. And it looks like we have a few more coming in now, Dr. Bradford. I'll post those for you shortly.
Thank you. Julie and Kathy, you're back for the last question.
Okay, so I just pulled up a copy of the Year 2 Eligibility Assurances and Certifications form. The question was, if a state was in compliance last year, do they still have to respond to number 4 on that form? And the answer is yes. Number 4 on that form is your plan for compliance monitoring, and that's the section that where most states in the past have just submitted a copy of their compliance monitoring policies and procedures manual to fulfill that requirement. That is going to be required regardless of whether or not you were in compliance last year. So if you're in compliance with DSO separation and jail removal, you don't have to submit plans for DSO separation and jail removal. You can just fill out that Certification of Adequate Plans and Resources form instead. But everyone, regardless of compliance status, will still need to submit a plan for compliance monitoring. And again, typically that has been a copy of the state's compliance monitoring policies and procedures manual.
Okay. All right. Another question. So for October 1, all that is due is the 28th assurance certification and SAG roster. Kathy?
So again, I think it's a little misleading. It can look more simple, but just to be clear, as you go through that Year 2 Eligibility Assurances and Assurances certification form, please read carefully. For each one, there's a if yes, do this, and if no, do that. So it's not just that form. Depending on your yes or no to those answers, we'll tell you what other step you need to take. So it's not just that form by itself. That form has embedded in it some additional things needed depending on whether your answer is yes or no, if you were in or out of compliance. So Year 2 eligibility assurances and whatever is determined that you need to submit as a result of completing that form, the training certification, the SAG roster.
Thanks, Kathy.
And I can go ahead and take the next one, Tanita, if you want. Thank you for raising a question. I know there was a technical glitch with the state agency contact information form where the first time we posted it, it had a problem where you would start to fill in one person's name for one position and it would fill that person in for every position, which might actually be the case in some of your states, but not, but shouldn't be. So we have corrected that, and that has been fixed on the website if you go and get a new version of that form that has been corrected. Thank you to those of you who brought that to our attention.
Okay, we're seeing concerns about speaker and mic. Unfortunately, we are using the office system, so if there's something that we didn't capture, we'll try to certainly speak to. We have time, so send your questions if there was something you think you missed or need clarification on.
While we're waiting for other questions to come in, I'll just reiterate, hopefully, regardless of any call quality, I think you've heard loud and clear that we are making some corrections to some of these edits that need to be made in the solicitation, so it will be reposted. You will be notified when it is reposted. We are also gathering the questions that need to be compiled into a frequently asked questions document, FAQs. Any that are, already taken care of with these edits that we're making to the solicitation will be resolved. But for other FAQs, any questions that you have about the solicitation, please continue to send them in. We are compiling an FAQ document, and we will post that. So thank you.
Okay, I have a little bit more complex question, and I think it looks like if you, Alan, we'll get back to you. Julie is assuring me that we'll follow up with you on your question around a plan for DSO. I have another question. Are these forms all in the solicitation? No, there's, go ahead.
Primary link to the posting page on OJJDP's website where all of the required attachments, forms, and examples will be housed. So the link that says refer here, most of the time throughout the solicitation links to that page where all of those documents will be held.
Just to clarify, this is the next question. If a state was in compliance last year, then all we need to submit is the SAG roster in 3 forms on October 1. And that's just for compliance, right? No?
So if the state was in compliance last year, you're going to need to submit your SAG roster, you're going to need to submit your training certification, and you're going to need to submit your compliance plans and resources certification where you check off each of those 3 requirements indicating that you were in compliance last year, and I believe that is...
And the Year 2 eligibility assurances and certifications form that everyone submits.
Yeah, so that should be it if you were in compliance with all the core requirements last year. I see a question that came in from Gina. Is it Taco? I'm not sure if it's Taco or Toko, so I apologize if I'm butchering your name, about the dates on the certification of adequate plans and resources. And Gina, there was a typo on that form. Taneen, I believe, referenced it earlier, or no, actually it was Kathy, I think, referenced it. Those dates should be October 1 of 2016 to September 30th of 2017. So it's referring to your compliance determination for FY17 that you just received a letter from us about. Obviously, you don't know yet whether or not you're going to be in compliance. Maybe you can guess, but you don't know for sure whether or not you're going to be in compliance for FY18. So we have changed those dates on that form, and that change will be reflected when we reissue the solicitation, hopefully in a couple of days.
Okay. Another question. Thanks, Julie. When you say all the core requirements, do you mean the first 3, or does that also include DMC as well? So when we're referring to your eligibility and certifications, we're referring to the first 3 core requirements, DMC, The law requires that we assess states to address DMC. We've laid out a plan for that. We'll have more detail about what that will look like to help and guide states. But when we're referencing if you were in or out this year, last year, we're talking about the first 3 cores. Next question, will you send out the reissued solicitation by email via listserv? Yes. Yes, we will. You're welcome. I see on the sheet for DMC plans the addition of non-secured data for detention and dispositions. Just to clarify, that is a new requirement. So we will follow up with information about DMC in regard to definitions, clarifying what data can be used for each data point. We will follow up with an additional either webinar, and in addition to that, we will go into detail in the training. We will send that out. That is not a deliberate omission. We just want to make sure that we are clarifying everything we can and get it right the first time. We've had some additional questions as of late Friday that brought some of this to our attention that we want to get right. Okay. Please define what is attempted as a question on number 6 of the compliance data submission and DMC plans document. Oh yeah, we first of all we need to edit that sentence, so we'll get that out. Number 2, that goes in the bag of making sure that we get follow-up around really clearly defining how we're moving forward with DMC. Next question. When registering Category 1 eligibility, do we submit last year's budget and other program attachment information, Kathy?
No. So for Category 1, I know you're used to submitting everything at the same time together, but since we are separating things out this year, the budget, things like a pass-through waiver if that's relevant to you, disclosure of pending applications, those sorts of things, the items that Nicole walked through are all due under Category 2 for the February deadline. You do not need to submit your budget for Category 1. You do not need to submit those other sort of typical or standard application pieces until Category 2 in February. So no budgets for FY19 just yet.
Okay, William, we're waiting for more questions if there are any that we can answer today.
Yes, and just as a reminder to our audience, if you could please just submit your questions into the chat pod, and we will address them as they arise. And it looks like Dr. Bradford folks are thanking you for answering their questions as well.
We're doing our best. We know that some of the newer requirements around DMC are a little more complex, and we are working with the team of our stakeholders to get that right, so that we can provide the direction that's needed. And we can talk a little bit about that. We're excited about the new November training while we're waiting on potential questions. I think most of you got to save the date maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, about October. We subsequently heard concerns about having to decide whether to go to one training or the other. I think folks are concerned about being able to get to the DNC CJA sponsor training in Baltimore. So we worked behind the scenes to try to make sure that everybody could get to the training they need to get to, particularly since we are restricted from when we have the training here in our main offices from having everybody come. And so by having co-located events, states and territories can bring more people to the training and have to be concerned about budget for one travel instead of 2 different travel times during the year. And so just a little bit of an outline draft, and Sherry, I don't want to steal the show. Sherry's online with us as well. She's our new CCAS lead. But we are working with many of you in the states and territories to participate in this training. We will have a pre-conference day, 101, JJ specialist, or core requirements, and then the next day we'll have more complex QA, tabletop, panel discussions around the first 3 cores, and then the last day will be in depth around our DNC requirements, our new DNC plan for this year, working and problem solving around some of the definitions, some of what we were assuming were common data points that look the same or may be the same, but we're calling it something different. We plan to have at that time worked out a lot of those kinks and make sure that we have a full day where we kind of go through and spend a committed time working through the DMC requirements, to include how to collect on those data points, perhaps bringing in some systemic organizational change TCA providers that will help kind of provide DMC coordinators in their leadership some ideas around how to address our questions for the DMC action plan, and then spend some time hopefully drafting some of what that looks like, featuring best practices that are out there, and working to ensure that you feel like you've got a good bit of your questions answered. But that DMC training day will focus on the Title II DMC requirements. So just a little bit of that. And the other thing that we're excited about is that we got a few days ago approval for our 2019 Title II conference. We are too ecstatic about that. We also got approval for tentative calls for compliance, JJ specialists, DNC calls. Those will go out in the listserv as well. So stay tuned. We're trying to get as much information out to you as possible about what we're doing. We want to apologize for some of the drastic changes that we made in terms of our reorganization. Some of you heard, some of you, may not have heard about the reorganization, so I'll address some of that now while we are collecting some more questions to answer. But we did go through a reorganization. We are now those responsible for Title II and other solicitations under the State Relations and Assistance Division. And so within that framework, operationally, we had to make some changes pretty quickly, and we've got new staff that are coming into the division that we're teaching and showing and setting bars of expectation around how to make sure that you're comfortable with them supporting, managing your awards. So we are doing some internal training. We recognize that some of that felt like we weren't in partnership with you and talking with you about some of the changes. We're trying to get ahead of that. We take ownership of that, and we will find ways to make sure that we give you a heads up about things that we certainly can beforehand, and be transparent about the decisions that we make as we can. So that's more questions. Will you explain how the 2 trainings are going to occur at the same time? Will I have to also register for the CJJ DMC training? They will be two separate conference events, and so you will need to decide who will go where. For those of you who are managing the Title II solicitation portions of it, DNC, JJ Specialist, or compliance, we are strongly encouraging you to attend the sessions for that will be sponsoring at that particular event. So you may want to bring other people to go to other sessions. The other thing is we may not use all the time for a couple of those days, and so Naomi was sharing with us, the CJJ Executive Director, that if you get a day pass for that day or certain days, you could certainly move over to their training workshops and participate in those workshops as well. Right. We're having little technical difficulties here. Please be patient with us.
And just as a reminder to our audience that we will have this recorded webinar on YouTube if any of you all would like to go back and view this webinar at a later date.
We submitted, next question, we submitted a new 3-year plan last year for DMC, and the new requirements are different than what we did last year. Is our plan from last year to be completely changed? I think if your plan does not mirror answering the questions that are in the solicitation, then yes, that is a change. Mike, we'll get back to you. When will we know content of November training? What part of the DNC conference will the training replace? So the same training that we were going to have in October, the same training we're having those days, is going to be November 27th through the 30th. We'll send a letter out once we get the CCR, conference cost, approved. It's being expedited, so we'll send out everything. Elizabeth Wolf is handling the coordination of that for us, along with Sherry, and she estimates that it'll take a couple weeks. The letter is already prepared, along with the content. We're just awaiting. But I do know, again, first day pre-conference, it's Core Requirements Training 101, JJ Specialist 101, JJ Specialist Training 101, that's 27th, 28th. More in-depth core requirements training. We're getting questions and concerns from the field. We have what we are hoping is a final technical assistance document, formerly known as the guidance manual, that's in draft form, that we pulled back, that Karen has advocated for approval for it. We're feeling hopeful, cautiously optimistic about having available to walk through on that training. Then the last day, again, will be DMC focus, and it would be specific to a Title II DMC requirement. When can we expect to hear about allocations for 18 and 19?
This is Kathy. For FY18, you'll hear soon from your program manager in JJ about FY18 allocations. Some of you who've been around for a while will be familiar with the fact that many times, and is the case again this year, that we're having to put the FY18 awards out to you with a withholding special condition because of the timing of when we find out what your allocations are. So your FY18 awards will be coming, before the end of this September, because before the end of the fiscal year, with the withholding special condition on it pending budget revisions, but you will soon hear from your program manager with your official FY18 allocations so that you can begin to work on your revised budget, and then we can work to get those budget withholding special conditions lifted shortly. That whole answer applies to FY18. For FY19, I can't say yet when we will know allocations, but it will be some time. We won't know those. We won't know those soon, since we're just now getting the FY18 allocations. So we'll be in touch with you very shortly about your FY18 allocations.
And just to piggyback on that, on the website we will put the FY18 allocations. It's the same location where you will go for the FY17 and all past allocations. That is in process right now.
It's the website that Nicole is referencing is linked in your FY18 solicitation. It was the link where we kept saying, when these allocations are known, they'll be posted here. So sure enough, they will be posted there.
And this is Julie. Just a quick reminder while we have everyone on the line, if you didn't see the email, that we do have a Compliance Monitors conference call coming up later this week. It's going to be on Thursday afternoon at our normal time of 2 p.m. Eastern. That is, I will say, assuming that we don't get hurricaned out. You may have seen there is a hurricane coming towards us here on the East Coast. So assuming that weather does not interfere, we are still planning to move forward with the compliance call this Thursday. So if you have additional compliance questions that have not been answered during this webinar, we may have some additional time to discuss those on Thursday as well.
Okay, so we're about to wrap up here. We have noted, and we'll note the questions that have gone unaddressed and try to get some information out to you. And there's, real quick, another rescission document listserv message that's coming out for those of you who are still inquiring about the remaining documents. Thanks so much.
I'll turn it back over to William. Thank you.
It looks like maybe about a minute left. We did want to wrap up everything, and first and foremost, on behalf of OJJDP, wanted to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. Just please note that on this slide, you may contact OJJDP NTTAC through the website displayed here, and you can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for OJJDP's NTTAC's TTA listserv, and also don't forget to like us on Facebook at OJJDP TTA. And as another reminder, you can also contact OJJDP via the Help Desk by following the contact information on this slide. And as a reminder that you all have probably seen in the chat pod here as well, but I'll just remind everyone to please note that the webinar is being recorded and it will be archived on OJJDP's YouTube channel. Normally we do a week, but I am going to ensure that we get this webinar available soon for you all. And just another reminder that the webinar will also be made available on the JJ Specialist Community of Practice. And that can be located here on the information on this slide. And lastly, just wanted to remind everyone, if you could please just take a few minutes to complete feedback via survey. The feedback that you provide will help us to improve our webinars in the future. Again, thank you again for joining us today. Everyone, please have a great afternoon. Thank you.